There are quite a few strange stories around today, but they do speak to a similar theme. And it is about the way in which the country's brains have been boiled by immigration. There's a story that we may move on to a little later about a cleaner, an office cleaner, who is taking legal action against a top city law firm after being fired for eating a leftover tuna sandwich from a discarded platter. So her job would have involved cleaning up after some lawyers had their lunch, and she ate a tuna sandwich. There's a Daily Mail columnist today who uses this as an opportunity to rant about immigration and to claim that the job of cleaning up the sandwiches of the lawyers should be done by some British person who is currently, some mythical British person who is currently sitting at home twiddling their thumbs. I told you that the relatively tiny number of unemployed people, willfully unemployed people, would be the next massive, and not because it takes any particular insight to predict it, but because they kind of shot their bolt on Brussels, which got the blame for everything that the Tories were responsible for years. And now if you're writing a column for the Daily Mail and some poor woman is being treated like a sort of 19th century housemaid, then you see that as an opportunity really to attack her. And, well, you're at it, to attack a mythical British person who is currently between jobs or out of work. It's extraordinary. But that's not the story that is going to detain us first. Nor is this. A scheme allowing Ukrainians to join family members who have already taken sanctuary in the UK has been unexpectedly closed. It's called the Ukraine Family Scheme. There's some dispute over just how sweeping a move this is, but opposition politicians have described it as cruel and below the radar, just days before the second anniversary of Russia's full invasion of Ukraine. It means, said one lawyer who follows these matters, that people in the UK with vulnerable and disabled family members may be left with no way to bring them to safety. And I read that story last night in the same moment that I read about James Cleverly, or I saw James Cleverly boasting about telling overseas care workers that they too will no longer be able to bring family members to this country, including, one has to presume, and I do believe to be the case, including their children. Yes, dependents. I mean, it is literally their children. And indeed, at the same time, anyone wanting to move family members with them to the UK, the minimum income requirement is being raised to £38,700. So that would include spouses. So it's a ban on care workers bringing dependents with them to the UK, and you need to be earning just shy of 40 grand a year if you want to bring your husband or your wife. Today in Parliament, James Cleverly wrote, "We have laid an order to ban overseas care workers from bringing dependents. This is just one part of our plan to deliver the biggest ever cut in migration." I think he also managed to spell dependent wrong, which I'm so old-fashioned that to me seems to be pretty poor, really, in the great scheme of things. A Home Secretary can't spell dependent. You presume that he has oversight of these things before they get sent out. But let's not get distracted by that. I never use this phrase. Even when I was writing How They Broke Britain, I don't really use this phrase because I think it's lazy and I think it's often used by idiots. But even a stopped clock is right twice a day. This makes me feel ashamed to be British. You are casting your net from a sector that is crying out for staff. You're casting it all around the world, in competition, of course, with other countries where demographics demand an influx of labour because they are an ageing population. And, of course, the demographics of an ageing population increases the need for people to look after the members of the ageing demographic. So you're casting your net around the world, trying to tempt people to come to your country to look after your elderly and your sick and your vulnerable. And you are telling them, you can come and care, just think about this, please. You can come and care for my family, but you won't be allowed to care for your own. You'll have to leave your children in India or in the Philippines is a very popular source of staff in these sectors, increasingly after they banned freedom of movement, of course, for people from the European Union. I don't know if you've ever heard me issue that phrase, except slightly in jest, you know. It makes me feel ashamed to be British. I won't do the usual mispronunciation of Rabbie Burns. I'll do my best to correctly remember. Won't some gift the gifty gears to see ourselves as others see us? I got it wrong again, didn't I? It's a real mental block for me, that, considering it's one of my favourite lines. I think you can spell dependent in either with an E or with an A, but I've got a feeling the A is the American leaning. But that Robert Burns line is about the power you would have for self-improvement, how wonderful it would be in your mission to be a better person, how wonderful it would be if you could truly see yourself as others see you. How wonderful would that be? If you could truly see, particularly if you're in a position of power or authority, because quite often the people around you are aware of the fact that status kind of creates a scenario in which they have to laugh at your jokes or they have to bend the proverbial knee. You're working in a care home, you're unlikely, in a country that's not your country of birth, you're unlikely to kick off too unduly, aren't you, about the circumstances. But goodness me, to see ourselves as others see us. And that is what we have become, apparently. And it's the boast about it that I find. I think I've understood it, by the way. I think I understand completely why these two stories have appeared at the same time. I think that what you would call the gross numbers, 672,000 more people entered the UK than left it in the 12 months to June, making a complete mockery of all the racist reasons given to you to vote for Brexit. I mean, that really was all that was left, wasn't it? After the economic impacts were measured, after the freedom of movement was abolished, after the claim that it would actually make trade easier was completely destroyed. Unbelievable, really, to reflect upon the fact that the Home Secretary is now boasting about not letting people bring their children here, Now, we're very privileged in this country. We're very blessed. It is unlikely that your economic situation would ever demand that you cross continents or leave the country to work. And if you did, you would probably be the dad. You know, the building trade in the 1980s saw an awful lot of people from this country go and work in Germany because they were enjoying a building boom and we were quite often in recession. It immortalised, of course, in the classic television comedy for people of my vintage, which you were sometimes allowed to stay up late to watch, Auf Wiedersehen Pet. So that's usually dads. Irish families of Irish extraction will be similarly familiar with the practice of dad coming over to Great Britain to work on the roads or to work on building sites and to go home, some perhaps at weekends, sometimes monthly, sometimes less. Puts enormous strain on families. But what the care sector relies upon is largely female staff. And what they are more likely to be than men is a mum. And James Cleverly is asking you to celebrate an instruction to those mums that if they want to come here and look after your mum, they'll have to leave their children behind. Do you know, this one's really got me. It's really got me, this one. I don't know why. There's terrible stuff happening all the time, isn't there? Terrible, terrible stuff being done in by government, lies and appalling provocations and disgusting culture wars. But this one really gets me. I'll tell you why it really gets me, because it's not. This is when culture war actually meets reality. This is when James Cleverly's conviction that what you want to hear is a promise from this government that foreign people are going to have their lives rendered less pleasant, even though they are the sort of foreign people that you're supposed to welcome, the ones that are coming here to wipe your grandma's backside. He thinks your votes can be won by telling you about how they're going to make that person's life less pleasant. And listen, no one is ever forced to take up one of these visas, these, what did we call it, liberty of motion visas. Practice so many sectors now being forced to issue visas, apply for visas to bring staff here from overseas, just like I told you would happen when they abolished freedom of movement. They'll have to bring it back just under a different name, and with, of course, the crucial difference that it doesn't apply to you anymore. You can't go, your children can't travel across the whole of Europe, taking up work and falling in love wherever they may please. But increasingly, we will have to essentially beg people to come here. But we're not there yet. We're still at the point where we're going, well, yeah, we want you to come here, but you must understand you'll be a second-class citizen. That's what this is. I think that's a fairly neat description of racism, isn't it? You can come here, you can work here, you can look after, you can issue my granddad's medications, you can wipe my mum's bottom, you can care for people that we are incapable of drawing people into the family, incapable of drawing people from the population, the indigenous population, into this profession, largely because the wages are so low and the work is so hard. People born into less blessed parts of the world will jump at the opportunity to come here and do it for us and do it instead. But we don't want them to enjoy their lives too much. We don't want them to bring their children with them. Good God, you're coming to look after my mum. You can leave your own bloody kids behind, says James Cleverly. And this one to me feels different from a lot of the other stuff. This one to me feels colder. It feels grimmer. It feels nasty. Barely worth the breath of pointing out to you that the Tories used to parade themselves as the party of family values, or indeed to wonder what this new breed of weirdos who are always talking about nuclear families and how mum should stay at home and not go to work, I bet that with their weird little conferences and their weird little titles, I presume they'll all be queuing up to condemn this, because it drives a coach and horses through the importance of family life, unless, of course, they think that foreigners... Well, I didn't mean you when I talked about the importance of family life. You're a Filipina. You can leave your flipping kids behind in Manila. You're coming here to look after my family. You're coming here to look after my mum so that I don't have to. I can stick her in a home. You can look after her, and I don't care who's looking after your children back in the Philippines. It's an extraordinary policy, isn't it? Isn't it? Or am I missing something? 0345 6060 973 kicks in on March the 11th. Even if there was a rationale for it, it's not something that you'd boast about, is it? You know, when you deliver bad news to somebody, you're supposed to do it regretfully. You're supposed to do it with a sense of sorrow. So I'm so grateful to you for coming here to care for our elderly when we are unable to fill these vacancies with people who were born here. Thank you so much. And because of significant strains upon our public services, you can't bring your family with you. You can't bring your little boy with you. You can't bring your baby girl with you. You can't bring your family with you. You can't bring your children with you. You're coming to look after our family on the condition that you leave your own family behind. It's extraordinary, isn't it? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And the point, of course, to make is that there are only two reasons to have done this. Even the numbers are high enough for it to matter. So either the numbers of people coming here to work in our care homes who want to bring dependents with them, either that number is sufficiently high for this to be meaningful policy, for this to take a proper chunk out of the overall numbers, despite the fact that even Idiot's Corner has never been populated with people complaining about care workers having children. Either there is a significant enough number of people in this position to make a dent in the overall numbers, in which case it's horrible and it's cynical, but it at least has a patina of rationality to it, or it's not, or there aren't enough people. There are not a significant number of people in this category, in which case, in many ways, it is less impactful upon human beings, but even more horrible in terms of what it says about our country. Because it means that James Cleverly doesn't even know how many people are going to be affected by this, but he is betting the house on you cheering it to the rafters, because that Filipino woman over there is going to have to leave, that mythical care home worker over there is going to have to leave her children behind. So there it is. If it's a meaningful number of people, it's going to deter them from coming here and create even bigger problems for the care sector. And if it's not a meaningful number of people, it's a disgusting policy designed almost exclusively to delight people who revel in the idea of foreigners having their lives rendered even more second class than they were already. Let's have a quick look in Idiot's Corner just to see what is there. It's not a lot, actually. And I think March the 11th, as a couple of you are pointing out, is the day after Mother's Day. Good old James Cleverly, eh? What's that you're doing to mark Mother's Day? Banning mothers from bringing their children to this country. Here you go. Sarah writes, for goodness sake, only people without children will probably apply. Then why introduce the policy? Brains. Honestly, it's their choice. Nobody is being fixed in the meantime. Where are we going to house these new people coming in? So there you go. It's designed to appeal to Sarah, this, who doesn't think it will actually affect anybody, but is also very worried about all the people who won't be coming here to work where they will live. It's designed to appeal to either the brain dead or the vicious or both. And I've spent some time lately trying to be a little bit more, I don't know whether I'm going to carry on actually, because I'm just preparing for the possibility of Labour government and the necessity of holding whoever is in power next to the same level of account that we've been holding the last shower. But they won't. They can't be as awful as this. So I usually now at this point say, could I be wrong? I just haven't got this wrong. This is disgusting. This is stone cold disgusting.